Awesome. We are back for another episode of Black Folks Doing Extraordinary Things, which is a series dedicated to simply showcasing all the amazing work that Black people are doing, both to contribute to our world, but to also make a living. Today, I am joined by one of my favorite people, Doreen Pierre, who is a creative professional and human resources manager. To start us off, Doreen, you want to give us a quick intro, your name? Obviously, we know it, but you can repeat it for yourself. I always love hearing people say their own names, your age if you're comfortable, where you're based, and what it is that you do.
All right, y'all. So my name is Doreen Pierre. I'm 28 years old. I'm based in Brooklyn, New York. And I'm a creative professional and human resources manager by day.
Awesome. So what does that mean? I feel like I hear creative professional and that can entail so many things. It could be visual art, it could be performing arts. What does that mean?
Yeah,
For you?
absolutely. So on my end, it's more so like visual content creation. So I am well versed in photography, videography. I do some fashion writing, which I'll probably get into more a little bit later. Creative project management as well. Like I found through like creating events and producing events, I'm like, oh, I'm actually good at like managing folks and freelancers as we're working through projects or events and things like that. So that's really where my work spans from. And I'm someone who's like endlessly curious. I'm always like wanting to learn new things and like get into new spaces. So it's like the sky's the limit. I kind of treat life like my playground. So that's really how I work in terms of like my creative work.
Awesome. And then what about the HR or human resources side of things?
Yeah, so like for human resources, I have a background in human resources, have a bachelor's and master's, and really day to day, I'm like an onboarding partner for a prominent university within New York City. So I'm ensuring that I manage a team that ensures the proper onboarding and retention of that population, and working with managers on creating and facilitating workshops around, diversity, equity, and inclusion within recruitment, making sure they manage employees effectively, pay them on time, and things like that. So it's like very different from my creative work,
Right.
but it still pays the bills. So
Yes.
here
Yeah.
we
So that
are.
was going to be my next question. So, like, what is, I mean, I imagine that day to day really varies for you depending on what projects you have lined up, but how do you kind of juggle the two? Like, do you kind of block off your time for HR work and then creative work? What does that look like?
It's very interesting, and I think it's a lot easier now that I've been working remote because of COVID. When I was in person, I had a lot less time to juggle because you're sitting in an office, and it's like even if you finish your projects for the day, you're still
Yes.
sitting there. And it's not
Yes.
like you can like disappear for a few hours and get things done without like, getting fired or something.
Right. And
But
I'm sure
like
people
being
pop into your office too,
right,
right?
pop into
Like,
your office, there's
yes.
something new, there's a fire you
Yes.
need to, like extinguish, like, it
Right.
gets crazy in person, but when you're home, it's like I have a calendar and I've been like using that calendar to my advantage. So I'll block off hours where I'm doing the HR work. I'll get into my other work because I'm currently like freelancing with an organization that directly impacts queer folk and LGBTQ individuals. So I've been doing a lot of, creative work around like their website redesign and overhaul, and managing and working cross-functionally with creative directors and the operations team and the creative and marketing teams, just to ensure like certain projects are getting done. So it's like I'll break into that for a little bit and then get back into the HR work until I'm like, okay, I'm done for the day. And then
Yeah.
like currently right now as well, like I'm trying to pivot into my creativity more. So based on work that I've done around fashion, for instance, within the queer and LGBTQ community, I'm now like enrolling in school to get a degree in fashion design. So it's like
Nice.
a lot
Yeah.
of stuff happening.
Yeah.
But I kind of make it work. Yeah, I think it's just my nature. Like,
Yeah.
and it's also interesting to share, and I don't mind sharing this at all, but I have been recently diagnosed with adult ADHD. So like for some reason I think it's like a gift and a curse. So I thrive in environments where I have to do a bunch of things at the same time. So it's been a very interesting journey figuring that out as well.
Yes. Well, welcome to the club.
Yeah,
I also have
you
been,
too?
I've had, yeah, years and years ago. So, and I think that's part of why I enjoy consulting so much because I can be
Yeah,
all
there's
over
so
the
so
place.
much you can do. Yeah.
Right.
And
Right.
it's like when I'm sitting around and I'm just like, oh, I'm doing this one thing every day. I'm like, I can't do this. I have to
Yes.
go.
Yes. It's like watching paint dry. Yeah, I
Yeah,
can't do the same type of work all the time.
all the
And
time.
I think that comes with being a creative too. Like you just live for variety, right? You're
Right.
just constantly thinking of new ideas and new approaches to things, which I don't know, is a blessing and maybe I guess also a curse at the
Yeah,
same time.
yeah. It's interesting because it's like when you think about it, it's like honestly, all of this stuff is, I think, created by society and the way that we are told that we need to work or need to be. So it's like it's not really a curse. It's more so how you're expected to be. Like you're expected to be in one box and this one person. And I know like, millennials and Gen Z have like moved past that whole like I have to have this job for 20, 30
Right.
years. But at the same time, I still do think that people expect you to be like this consistently same person. I'm like, no, I have so many interests and things I want to do. Like, leave me alone.
Right. Let me be great. Let
So
me thrive and
let
do
me
it
be
all.
great. Yeah. And
Yes.
pay me, please.
Please,
Yeah.
please. Oh, I left my mug, but I have a pay Black women for their labor mug that I like to
Absolutely.
flash every now and then when I'm on camera.
Yeah, absolutely.
For sure. So you kind of hinted at some of the things you're working on right now, but what are some of what are some of those projects a little bit more in detail? What do you enjoy most about your work? And then in contrast, what are some of the things you dislike or could do without?
Yeah, what I love most about my work again is like working on varied initiatives and projects and working along with people and ensuring that they're using their best talents to get the job done and I'm using my best talents. I really, thrive in like motivating and pushing people to do their best work. And at the same time, I'm like, I love aesthetic and creativity. So like making sure things look amazing, making sure people want to buy certain products and things like that. I think I thrive in like that marketing creative production range. And what is the other question you had?
What do you kind of dislike, or what could you do
Ooh,
without when it comes to your work?
I don't know. Like I feel like I'm the type of person who likes to have autonomy in my work and ensuring that like the product will get done, but it doesn't necessarily have to be done in the way someone else thinks it has to be done. I think in that spans more so in my HR work and like how I got even into human resources or like how I got to where I am like wasn't linear at all. Like even in my undergrad, right, in college, I started off on the pre-med track and I burnt out of that. I was like, it's not gonna work. And so like I was like, it's not working. After Orgo came, I was like, how many more science classes? No, it's not happening. Really when you think about like when I think about my background, right? It's like I come from like a family of Haitian immigrants. So it's like this protection around like you can't be a part of the working class, you have to excel, right? So leaving pre-med, I was like, not gonna do that. My mom's like, okay, I need you to marry a man and settle down. I'm like, I'm kind of gay. And then I'm like, well, I'm really interested in like people's psychology and how people tick and what motivates them to work and like advocating on behalf of others. I feel like
Yeah.
that's really like rung through like my work. And so I was like, let me go into human resources. And then you get into the field and you're like, oh, well, a lot of human resources work sometimes is advocating on behalf of the employer versus the employee. So I was like, that's very interesting. So then I'm like, all right, let's think about like creatively what you're passionate about, right? And that's how I got into like again that advocacy work around like promoting the visibility around queer and marginalized identities. And specifically my angle is usually through fashion because I love fashion. So thinking about how people represent themselves, whether it be at work when they're queer, how that visual aesthetic affects them at work, day-to-day life, how that's tied to like social and economic disparities and things like that. That's really the work that I've really been like interested in and how I got there. But what I love about that work is the fact that I have impact, number one, and ensuring that again that I'm putting that visibility out there, whether it's for myself or my community, because I
Yeah.
think visibility is directly tied to like pushing communities forward and creating opportunities. So that's really more about that. I feel like I went into like a few,
No, that was perfect.
but
That
but
was
yeah,
good. That was good. No, it's interesting for me too to just kind of hear more. But backtracking just a little bit, how did you make kind of that leap from the pre med space to discovering HR? Was there something like, did you go to like a college session and they were like, here are some interesting things if you like, psychology, or how did you get there?
yeah. It honestly, I felt like it was people and community. I would connect with a few folks who were like a couple years ahead of me, who I knew at the university, and I, spoke to them about my interests and spoke to them about what they were doing, and I was like, you know what, this actually makes sense. Like I've always had, this interest in, again, advocacy for people, figuring out what motivates them, how they work, why people do the things they do. And I felt that human resources gave me that education would give me like a well-rounded approach to how those things intersect when it comes to work, especially. So that's how I got there. And the pivot changed my trajectory. But even in doing that work, it's not that I love the work. I do think that the industry, however, itself, I feel like when you go and get an education, you're shown this idealistic version. And
Sure.
then when you
Yeah.
get into work at corporations and stuff, you see really if a company really aligns with those ideas or if there's something else behind the scenes
Right.
going on. And a
Yeah.
lot of these corporations have a lot going on behind the scenes. You got the branding, and then you see when you work somewhere, you see what's really going on. So
Yeah. For
um
sure. Kind of like the facade
yeah,
just kind of drops down once you're actually
once
inside.
you're there, yeah. And
Yeah. Yeah.
sometimes it's good, sometimes there's always going to be something, but like you kind of have to pick and choose what battles you're gonna you're gonna go for that day. So
For sure, for
that's how
sure.
I
That kind
feel.
of segues into my next question, which is,
Yeah.
uh, how do you think your identity as a Black person has, and how has that impacted your specific work or your role or your industry?
Yeah, so I can talk about I'll split that up into two. Like in terms of like my human resources work, there's not a lot of people like me within like
Sure.
my particular office. I might be like one of five black, women. I'm the only masculine presenting woman at my job for I've been there 6 years. Yeah, I've been the only one.
You didn't have to
And
laugh like that.
so it was just like it's like learning that it's a lot of times it feels like you're just navigating a game to me. That's what it feels like. And to be honest, I am blessed to be able to see it that way. I think you have to really be careful in spaces where you are a minority because once you start saying things or putting truth out there, you can be labeled. Interestingly enough, though, I have tried to be an advocate and to speak up at my job, and I'm not sure if anything has really happened that I would say is
Yeah,
bad. And maybe I can attribute that to my masculine presentation. So it's like for me, I feel like I try my best to use what platform I have to speak up when I feel like things are not going the way they should be, or like when people are not being considered at my job. But that always comes at a risk of being
absolutely.
scapegoated within an organization. But at the same time, I learned a lot about just how I'm looking to divest from wanting to be that perfect Black employee. And I feel like as Black folk, you're often expected, or you're like, you got to be excellent, you got to be perfect, you got to have the
Right,
most degrees. And I'm
right.
like, damn, that costs a lot of money.
And
Like,
time and
and
energy.
time, debt. And it's like you see when we talk about the game, you see a lot of folk, especially the Caucasian folk, getting to places due to like aligning themselves with the money or networking. And it's like I'm doing all these things to get these credentials, and it's like I'm moving at a fraction of the pace,
Right,
you know what I'm saying?
right,
And
right.
so it's like really like with COVID and being Black and seeing all the things that are happening, I'm like, you know what? I don't want to strive for perfection anymore. I want to move towards like, how do I work smarter? How do I get into spaces? How do I connect with the right people to get to where I'm looking to get to? And then within the creative realm, like my work is especially like centered around Black people, people of color, and queer communities. And a lot of times it's like this cognitive dissonance or something. It feels like this is really important to me, but it's hard to find opportunities where I could really get my foot in the door and do this type of work on a mainstream scale. And
Okay.
so I feel like that's somehow has deterred me from like fully jumping into my creativity. But that's also something that I'm looking to move past, which is that fear of like, if I want to really take this seriously, again, how do I align myself with the right opportunities, the right people to get me to the places that I'm going to? So I'm like a work in progress. And again, like being in New York City has been like a second childhood as I'm like reaching my 30s. I'm like, damn, I've changed so much and
Yeah,
just
for
learned
sure.
so much and explored so much just by doing and just saying, like, we just gonna try it and see. And just every opportunity just gives me further insight into myself and who I want to be and like, oh, now I understand why I do things the way I do it, or why
Right.
I enjoy certain things. And then you just don't, once you figure that out, you're like, I'm not accepting anything less than that. So
Absolutely.
I feel like that's how my identities kind of intersect to really like forge and create who I am.
That's a beautiful story because I feel like I don't know, the more you just kind of put yourself out there and try to do things, the more kind of just introspective you become over time and
Hmm.
just more self aware. And it becomes easier, especially if you have, kind of a pie in the sky goal. It becomes easier for you to kind of weed through, like, yes, I should take this
Yep.
opportunity. No, this is not right. Right. And you just keep moving through it. Right. Until you
Yeah,
essentially manifest what you want. It's possible. Anything's
absolutely.
possible, right? You kind of hinted to on it, but what are some tangible steps or actions that you would recommend someone takes if they want to go the path of, becoming an HR manager, and then also if they want to go into this creative space where they're supporting various communities? Because it sounds like you got your hand kind of in a lot of different areas.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things is for me is huge thing is like confidence and like getting clear on who you are and what you want to do. And I think another thing for me is like people aren't going to know who you are if you just sit on your couch and say like, I'm great. Why isn't anyone hiring me? Why isn't anyone
Yes.
hitting me up? No one's gonna know. And that doesn't
Right.
mean you have to like amass like a huge amount of followers on social media. It doesn't mean you have to do that. I know some people are certainly great at that and being seen online, but like it's the reaching out aspect. It's the talking about what you can do and what you're about to as many people as you can, going to those, events or panels and meeting people, or even sharing your expertise in different formats, whether that be online, whether it be through creating workshops, whether it be through creating content. Like you have to get out there and do the work and show people that you're doing the work. And it's like it's interesting because as I'm getting more into like creative work and learning more about what a creative process looks like, people think that you have to get the expertise first to get something done. And what the creative process teaches you is that you're not going to become like a better writer unless you write. You're not going to become a better photographer
Absolutely.
unless you pick up the camera and take some photos. And it's
Right.
like anything worth doing is worth doing badly. And like as a person who's like always had this, like I've been taught like you got to do things right and perfect and it has to be well done, and like, you know what I'm saying? And that could be so exhausting when you like step into a space and people are just like mediocre or just like don't do the best job and they're still like
Right.
moving ahead and feeling happy, and you're just like, why am I so
Yeah.
miserable?
Hmm.
It's
Hmm.
like, well, it's like you don't have to be perfect, and it's good to do things well. I do think we need things done well, but it's more so about doing that work and then learning, taking those lessons that you learn and saying, you know what, well, here are the things I did well at this project, and here are the things where I could have been maybe more accountable, or here I want to get better for the next time. But it's really just like allowing yourself to move past that fear and do the work, and moving forward with your journey. It's a journey, hopefully on
Absolutely.
this earth we have at least a few years, or a lifetime to get things right or get things the way that we want them to, but we're not going to get there unless we take that journey or that chance, right? So
Absolutely. Got to take that risk, got to put fear aside and just kind of push through it.
just do it.
Um, yeah, I liked your point about just like social media following. I think a lot of people get hung up on that. They're like, I don't have enough followers. Like,
Yeah.
who cares about what I'm doing? And it's like, it's not always about, especially now, you can't just focus on social. You can literally make, 3 to 5 new connections in
Yep.
person or however, let's say on LinkedIn, and that could be your end, right? For
Yep.
you to just take off. Like you don't need 5,000 followers. You just need a couple people who believe in what you're doing that are going to help
Yep.
you elevate.
For me, it's like I had gotten into that trap as well, as someone who loved being on social media and things like that. And it's like social media does not pay the bills for everyone. And sometimes even the
Right.
folks with hundreds of thousands of followers don't make money off of that. Could be
Yes.
living couch to couch, to be honest. There's an abundance. And I think as someone who is from a marginalized identity within the United States, we're taught to think in such a scarcity mindset that we're like, well, if I don't do it this way, it's not gonna happen. And if I'm not successful on social media, then it's not happening. And it's like,
Right.
no, you can make money in other
Right.
ways. just have to get educated on what those opportunities are. And again, that's a lot of the work when we think about marginalized identities. How do we figure out what these opportunities are? Because I mean, there's people out there. I had seen a meme the other day getting paid to create the clicker and the mouse, like hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. And I'm like, somebody told me to go get a college degree. And I'm like,
No, but really.
Right? So it's just like, there, you have to think in an abundance mindset and think about, okay, how can I create something out of nothing? How can I, monetize whatever I need to monetize? How do I make life work for me and not have to be working hard for life, right? So it's just really important to think about, like, if something's not working one way, try a different way.
Right. Don't just throw the
Think of
towel
something.
in and be done.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. I was down a YouTube rabbit hole, which is what always happens to me, at least a couple times a week. And I discovered this couple, and they are generating like $100,000 a month, doing just like online products.
Yeah.
And I think they have college degrees, but they're not experts in these products. All they do
Right.
is they Google and they do some research. They find a space that hasn't been filled yet, and they
Yeah.
build the product, and then they sell it. And I'm
Right.
like, again, just like thinking outside the box, I would have never thought to do that, right? I'm
Nope.
just like, what? It just, yeah,
Yeah. And YouTube be one of those places where you just be, I'm like, where did they come up with this? Like, and people are just sitting there figuring these things out. And I'm like, nah, I gotta stop playing myself. Right.
exactly,
And like,
exactly.
I'm like, how do I do this smarter? Because I'm like, I'm coming home. Am I feeling exhausted? Am I feeling played at work? Am I feeling, and I'm like, this is the year. Like, if COVID taught us anything, it's like, why am I sitting around dealing with something or doing something I don't want to do? Right.
Absolutely.
Like,
Yeah.
I'm not doing that. Like, there has to be a different way, and there has to be a way to like make work, like, work for you and for the life you're trying to build. I'm like, that to me feels like the goal. So it's like, for me, it's like having to unlearn all these ideas in my mind that I have about like what success means,
Yep.
right? And
Absolutely.
is hyper visibility getting me to where I need to go, or do I need to focus on honing in that craft and like getting to work and doing, not just being visible, but doing the work behind the scenes? There's like, I feel like it's very trendy to like, we're visibly out here and like we're looking like we're doing the work, but behind the scenes we're not doing the work. And I'm like, nah,
Right.
I'm trying to be behind the scenes doing that work
Yes.
and
Yeah.
building
I hear you.
building out, right? Yeah.
For sure. For sure. Cool. Any final words or anything else you want to include or share?
No, that's it for me. That's
I
it for
feel like
me.
you dropped some nice little nuggets of wisdom, so much appreciated. Are there any current projects or social media links you want folks to follow
Social media links. Yeah.
after we had that conversation?
Yeah, I will send my social media link. I think at this current point in time, I'm like saving up money for school and like other creative endeavors. So
Yeah.
I will link my GoFundMe account to the
Yes.
situation if you like. Right now, I'm really, really, really focused on like doing some more creative freelance projects. So I'll link my website below as well, and moving through school and figuring out this pivot. So I'll share all of those links below.
Awesome. Cool.
Yeah.
I so appreciate you. Thank you for joining. And hopefully we'll have more amazing conversations. We're gonna have to do a follow-up because I'm like, I
Yeah,
want to
please.
see
I would love to.
what the next phase is, right? Like, I think it's important to like follow people's journeys and see what it looks like. So yeah.
Thank you for
Appreciate you
having me.
again. Of course. All right, y'all. Thanks again for tuning in to Black Folks Doing Extraordinary Things. Again, this was the episode with Doreen Pierre. We will see you back here next week.